Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Having fun? Excellent. So glad. It's wonderful to see everybody. Good afternoon. It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome you to our 11th annual Dwelling of the Gallant, where we take time to recognize and to honor and to celebrate the women of Williams by sharing in the stories and experiences of featured alumnae speakers from across classes who are here celebrating their reunions. Over the past few years, we've been acknowledging the important milestones in the college's path towards coeducation, some of which you were just watching in the video. This reunion weekend, we have a special opportunity to honor and celebrate the first fully coeducational class at Williams to graduate, the class of 1975. As many of you know, it was not until 1971 that 7 women walked across the Williams commencement stage to receive diplomas for the first time in the college's history. In the fall of '71, the first 4-year class of women and men arrived on campus. The classes of 1972, '73, and '74 subsequently graduated a number of women who had transferred into the college, and there were many more who spent extensive time here as exchange students. And then there is the class of 1975, and happily every class that has followed at Williams as a fully coeducational from matriculation to graduation. And obviously that is something to celebrate, but one of the wonderful things about the last few years is every year we have celebrated a step on the way to this celebration this year. So I think that's been a particularly long and well-deserved celebration of this important milestone. By expanding access to women and others who had not historically been included at Williams, the college has really doubled down on its commitment to educating those who could go out into the world and make a difference. And as a result, our impact in the world is all the broader and deeper. This is something President Jack Sawyer understood and moved to do in pursuing coeducation many years ago. Since that time, we strive to build a collaborative campus that encourages dialogue across differences as we continue the essential work of preparing the next generation of leaders. The women on the stage today all experienced Williams at different moments, and their individual journeys have led them here to share their stories. I hope you'll refer to the print program for a full introduction, but I am going to briefly welcome each one here in my remarks. And I'll go in order of how they're sitting here on the stage, and that's the order they'll speak. So I begin with Pamela Hawkes from the class of 1975, one of those women that walked across the stage. A principal at Scattergood Design, Pamela has been recognized for her integration of contemporary architecture within historic settings. Notably, she has designed nearly 24 buildings supporting girls' education in Tanzania. Her work also includes conservation plans for the Georgia O'Keeffe Home and Studio in New Mexico and the J. Irwin Miller House in Indiana. For 26 years, Pamela was a principal at Anna Bay Architects, now Annam in Boston, directing award-winning projects including the Currier Museum of Art, Liberty Hotel, and the Cambridge Public Library. A fellow of the American Institute of Architects, she previously taught at the University of Pennsylvania and holds graduate degrees from Columbia and from Berkeley. Her awards include a Loeb Fellowship at Harvard, a Women in Design Leadership Award, and naming as a pioneer of preservation by Preservation Massachusetts. I'm now going to move to our second speaker to introduce my now old friend, Vidisha Patel, from the class of 1985. I've always tried to figure out in life when somebody goes from being a new friend to an old friend, how many years you have to know them. Vidisha is a licensed mental health therapist with a doctorate in counseling psychology. She founded Peace of Heart, LLC in 2004, where she offers therapeutic interventions for individuals and families navigating stress, anxiety, relationship concerns, and emotional regulation. She provides counseling services to college students at New College of Florida and has previously worked with teen parent programs and Girls Incorporated. Vidisha serves on a number of boards, including Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital and Sidwell Friends School, and she is concluding a 5-year term of valuable leadership as a trustee of Williams College. Prior to her career as a therapist, Vidisha earned an MBA from Columbia University and worked for multinational banks and corporations in the United States and India. Moving now to Louisa Gloger from the class of 2000. Louisa joined Headland Center for the Arts as executive director in November of 2024. She brings to the role over 15 years of experience in the arts, most recently as executive director of the Bolinas Museum from 2022 to 2024. During her time at the museum, Louisa created an inclusive and supportive environment for her staff, increased fundraising and grants from private donors and foundations, expanded the permanent collection with acquisitions of work by contemporary artists, and received substantial funding to support a robust and flourishing education program. The daughter of a family of artists, Louisa worked at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and the Berggruen Gallery in San Francisco, as well as owned her own art consulting business. She currently serves on the board of the Smithsonian Institute's Archives of American Art. And lastly, I introduce you to Nancy Ma from the class of 2010. Nancy is a first-generation performer, playwright, and filmmaker from Chinatown, New York. A 2025-28 Jerome Hill Artist Fellow, she'll be taking the next 3 years to develop Sweatshop Melody, a musical inspired by her mom's time at a garment factory, a film inspired by the late activists Grace Lee and Jimmy Boggs, and a storytelling business. She's worked with the Pan-Asian Repertory Theater, Ojai Playwrights, and Under the Radar at the Public. And Nancy has been awarded residencies with the National Arts Club, the New Harmony Project, and the Museum of Chinese in America. She leads personal storytelling workshops with The Moth, and most recently, she directed a short documentary, One Day You Are Not Here, and co-founded Max 2 Film Festival, a 2-minute film festival focused on experimentation and community. I hope you will all now join me in a rousing celebration of our 4 alumni speakers. We will begin with remarks from Pamela.
Thank you, President Mandel. It's such a pleasure to share the stage with younger Williams women and to represent the remarkable class of 1975. When I say remarkable women, I need only mention that I've just come from a tour of the Clark Art Institute, where classmate Denise Sobel is president of the Board of Trustees. The title of this panel would be pretty intimidating if it was included in an essay test. Freshman year at Williams was the first time I dwelled anywhere other than with my family, but I was not a Gallant. I'd attended a small public high school in Maine and was kind of a geek. My sisters corrected me to say that I was a nervous geek. And for the first month or two, I tagged along to social events behind roommates Chessie Hill and Julie Winkler. Eventually, I found spaces and people where I felt at home here, and that's part of today's story. I was attracted by the environmental studies program, left as a studio art major, and didn't get to architecture school or graduate from architecture school until 10 years later. The profession didn't seem like an option in the early 1970s, when women made up less than 10% of architecture students and less than 5% of licensed architects. I realize now that Williams gave me a 4-year education in architectural intervention by virtue and creating community by virtue of my ringside seat, watching the transformation from a school of 1,200 men to a co-ed campus for 1,800. The smallest move was an addition wedged between the old gym and the pool, just big enough for a women's locker room with a dance studio above. I'd quit ballet in junior high school, but was delighted to discover I could get PE credits for dance. And the next thing I knew, I was helping choreograph a performance in the squash courts during winter study, alongside future Broadway great, the late Bill Finn, class of '74. Joy Dewey brought emerging and established dance companies to campus, and the Special Collections Gallery is celebrating 50 years of dance at Williams right now. I found community moving in unison to Chopin or jazz, like classmates who found it by playing on sports teams, the band, or the E-flats. Practicing in the public realm, I've enjoyed creating venues that bring people together in many ways, from a 140-seat community arts center in New York's Finger Lakes region to world-class Symphony Hall. Historic buildings underpin the look and feel of the campus, and the college has been a good steward, whether through intent or just plain Yankee thrift. In my time, which I realize makes me sound really old, art studios were in Goodrich Hall, originally built as a chapel, now in its third incarnation as a community and performance space. I was intrigued by the contrast between the once sacred interiors and the messiness of art, of lumpy chairs and leaded glass windows. I found fellowship with other artists, particularly as we reminded our pre-med and pre-law classmates that we really were working just as hard as they were. The drawings and prints of repurposed spaces around campus in my senior show may have inspired Ted Sandy, professor of architecture and architectural history, to suggest a career in historic preservation. And I am still looking for ways to uncover history, like the joist pockets that you might see in the new egress stair at the Portland Museum of Art, which were inspired by the Federal period staircase that was restored at the same time. Mission Park was the biggest intervention on campus, finished just as we arrived in the fall of 1971. The contemporary dormitory by Mitchell Jurgala, who went on to design the Australian Parliament building, was a place students loved to hate. That's why rooms were available for fellow art major Meg Race and me when we returned from spending the fall semesters of our junior year at Smith and Wellesley, respectively. In 3 semesters there, I found lifelong friendships. My room offered breathtaking views of the Berkshires and the campus, and the long white walls of Armstrong House were irresistible to us creatives. We festooned the stair hall with a pastiche of American architectural styles, and future architect Hank Haff transformed a basement storage room into a fantastic party space. Things haven't changed much. When I Googled Mission Park recently, I discovered a question posed on the college's X account, quote, "True or false, Mission Park was designed by a prison architect to be riot-proof." The handsome masonry walls of the 19th century Cambridge Public Library make it look more like a prison for books than a community hub. And there was many debates about the place and scale of contemporary design in historic settings for the library in more than 100 public meetings over 10 years, from initial planning to opening day. The transparent addition by William Rahn Associates, architects of this space, embraces the landscape like Mission Park does, and welcomes people who speak languages of more than 100 languages. By locating the public access computers in young adult room in the historic building, we also demonstrated that old buildings are relevant in the 21st century. And when we photographed the teen center, we brought in students from Cambridge and Latin School next door who walked into the space and said, wow, we should hold prom here, which to me is the ultimate compliment. For institutions like Williams, buildings are often the largest, boldest, most durable expression of values. The college outlawed fraternities the decade before admitting women, absorbing former frat houses to enable all students to live and eat on campus. That enabled the school's most public face along Route, that ensured that the school's most public face along Route 2 was no longer dominated by symbols of exclusion. That's important because the class of '75 wasn't just the first class of freshman women, but also the most diverse class to date. And for me, I know, although my experience was, all of our experiences were very different, that made a big difference in terms of feeling welcome. When my husband Scott and I began working in Tanzania in 2013, just a third of all girls finished secondary school, and even fewer continued on to high school and university beyond. Dormitories make the difference, promising parents safety for their daughters, offering girls the chance to study free from housework and pressure for early marriage. This 100-girl dormitory compound with multi-purpose dining hall, 25 miles from Tanzania's second largest city, could turn any public secondary school into a boarding school. Generosity isn't symbolized by one building on campus. It's everywhere. When my family's circumstances changed junior year, I was fortunate to get a partial scholarship and jobs showing slides for art history classes. That enabled me to finish college and later 2 graduate degrees with a manageable debt. Our work in Tanzania was inspired by our desire to give thanks for our good fortune and funded by 2 nonprofits created by women in the Portland area, Aimee Basir and Nano Chatfield. Each has endeavored to improve the odds for girls' education with support from friends and foundations. The Girls Foundation of Tanzania provides access to quality education for high-achieving girls in extreme poverty. Their new campus in Arusha offers those girls a community of support through university and beyond, while welcoming children of all ages to programs in literacy, women's empowerment, and environmental stewardship. The college has changed a lot in 50 years. I'm nostalgic for dumpy old Baxter Hall, where I found solace in milkshakes, or should I say fraps, and grilled honey buns. But I'm thankful that let's hear it, yes, for the honey buns. But I'm thankful that the college continues to engage thoughtful designers. As an architect, I can't ignore the fact that building construction and operations accounts for more than 1/3 of global carbon emissions each year. I've been reusing buildings for 50 years, and more recently promoting the concept of new design for future reuse. I was honored to design the Matt Cole Environmental Studies Library in 1995, and it's with a sense of justice and humility that I include images of that building under deconstruction to make way for the Zilka Center for the Environment 20 years later. It's not all about the buildings, of course. People make community, and so many have supported my journey. Parents and grandparents, professors, colleagues, classmates, and friends. My husband Scott, passionate, curious, first architect I ever worked for. Ann Bea, daughter of a Williams alum and a mother of one as well, always braver than I was. These days I'm inspired by the promise that I see in the eyes of young women that we've met in Tanzania, my grad students at Penn, and my step-grandchildren, ages 9 to 29. A remarkable thing happened at our 45th reunion. You know, the one that we didn't have because of COVID. Classmates got together formally and informally over Zoom and podcasts to share memories of their experience here. They admitted that sometimes they didn't feel like they belonged either. If I could talk to my 18-year-old self, or my classmates, or other nervous nerds who might be listening, I'd say, relax, reach out. You can find love, work, and community, maybe even become Gallant. starting here in the Purple Valley. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I love the way life comes together and creates moments of perfect intersection, and today is such a moment for me. My time at Williams shaped the trajectory of my life's journey in ways I could never have predicted. The honor and opportunity of speaking with all of you today encouraged me to reflect on how the various decisions I made throughout my life have helped to form who I am and how I glean meaning from life. I was not supposed to come to Williams. My college counselor said I was aiming too far and too high, and I should not bother to apply. What Mr. Cahart did not understand is that his words propelled me to ensure that I did come to Williams. But before I get to 18-year-old me, I was born in India to highly educated parents who respected the value of learning, exploring, and expanding one's horizons. We came to the US as a family of 5, my mother, father, brother, me, and Sulochna, our then nanny, who later played a significant parental role in my life. We arrived with only the $40 the Indian government allowed for emigres. But my father had a job, and my mother, a fully trained OBGYN, was going to get one, while Sulochna watched over me and my brother. This was the late 60s. That plan was not going to happen. My mother had to retake her medical licensing exams to be considered for employment. So she started volunteering and joined other women in fighting for women's rights. Roe versus Wade became her cause. Helping women in inner city DC was her calling. She would drive fearlessly through some of the then most dangerous parts of DC, dressed in her sari, sort of like I am today, stopping to chat with everyone along the way. They all knew her because she was open and willing to listen, talk, and help with action. All of this came naturally to her, part of her inheritance from her own mother, I now realize. My maternal grandmother was also a pioneer, among the first women to fight for women's rights in India. I would later discover that my tiny 4'10", seemingly quiet grandmother, the one on the left, actually was leading the National Council of Women in India. Soon-to-be Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru even asked her to review his speech that he was to make on the eve of India's independence from the British. My paternal grandmother, meanwhile, was no different, becoming the first woman in her college cohort class and the first one to study economics, not home economics, economics. She would take me to meetings of the censorship board for film, where she and others scrutinized Bollywood films, determining their appropriateness. She also worked as a magistrate in the court system, supporting placement for young children who had nowhere to go. How is this possible in a country where women are assumed to live behind the closed doors of the home, the country of arranged marriages and women's subservience? It was possible in part because my great-grandfather made sure his eldest daughters were educated. While my grandmother and her sister did not get formal schooling, they were taught to read and write, as well as to take care of the household. Thank goodness he believed everyone should be educated and that his definition was broader than obtaining a college degree. These were the legacies I carried with me to Williams, although I wasn't fully aware of them at the time. I arrived as a stereotypical Indian immigrant girl, pre-med, and determined to follow in my mother's footsteps. You see, when I was just starting high school, my mother passed away from cancer. As I was the only girl in the family, the first girl born after 75 years on my father's side, the pressure was on me to take care of everyone emotionally while still succeeding professionally, as my mother had. But I also wasn't someone to back down from a challenge. Just like when Mr. Cahart questioned my ability to be admitted to Williams, I was not going to surrender. I arrived with one goal in mind, to educate myself academically and move on. And then along came my real education, the Williams community. My classmates, roommates, faculty, staff. As a pre-med freshman, I signed up for biology, chemistry, calculus, and English, because it was required. But that first spring, my soon-to-be roommate came into my life. She literally dragged me to the registrar's office and forced me to sign up for Art 101. You cannot leave Williams without taking an art history class, she said. It's a total waste of time, was my response. But as often happens, she, the future lawyer, won the debate. In the process, my roommate and Williams changed my life. I fell in love with art history and with learning for the simple joy of it. Milo Beach's classes helped me discover Indian art and inspired me to add Asian studies as a concentration. My junior year, I was emboldened to try something called women's studies. I had no idea what that was about. Despite my lineage of strong women, or maybe because of it, I didn't see it as a subject one needed to study. But I decided to give it a try. The class made me think about the mark my foremothers had made, and I delved into their histories. This was another pivotal point in my life. I uncovered more of my roots and what it meant not only to be a woman, but specifically an immigrant woman. As many of us do, I spent my first years at Williams trying to fit in. I molded myself to the preppy culture then dominating campus. Anyone remember the official preppy handbook by Lisa Birnbach? It was all the rage back then. My nod to my background was to wear my colored bangles alongside the W sweatshirt I always wore to class. Gradually, and with positive reinforcement from both international and non-international friends alike, I began to feel more at ease and to reveal more of my roots, wearing saris and salwar kameezes around campus, especially for special events. In hindsight, at least, I would say I became more myself. I began to understand I was a unique conglomeration of different cultures, values, and morals, and while I remained on guard, I found that my unique self, while not always understood, was always welcome in the community. I wrote a paper where I described myself as the 1.5 generation foreigner, feeling like someone who didn't neatly belong in either the US or India, but was a citizen of the world. Ultimately, I made the tough decision to drop pre-med, recognizing there would be other ways I could help and support people in the world. I volunteered with Pure Health, counseled fellow students, and was running the organization by my senior year. This was my vocation, but I decided I needed a real job. I couldn't envision a career in art history, so I followed the pack to Wall Street, forgetting all that I had learned to date about being true to myself. I figured I was good at math and could learn whatever else was needed along the way. The work introduced me to a global community of business people. My jobs with multinational banks took me around the world. I even wound up living and working in India, which had been a lifelong dream. But something was still missing. I came back to the US for a graduate degree in finance and international business, not because I wanted to, but because it made sense. Going through the motions, I wondered when I would finally figure out what it was that was missing. Well, when I wasn't looking, there it was. A classmate introduced me to an Indian medical resident, Gujarati no less, which is my background, and Ashwin and I have crafted a life together and have raised 2 amazing humans who have also been able to share the Williams experience with me. But it wasn't just about getting married. My husband is passionate about and excellent at his career, and we relocated as a team to support his dream. His passion and drive inspired me to face what I wanted to do with my own career. From that came the return to education and to counseling, which I had done at Williams. After all the twists and turns, I had come full circle in a way. With a doctorate in counseling psychology, I now get to help people learn to manage their emotions on an individual or small group basis. And as a board member at a children's hospital, a secondary school, and a beloved college, I still get to use some of those practical business tools I had honed earlier in my career. My path may have been windy, but I use everything I have learned. I found a way to combine my grandmother's activism and community engagement with my mother's devotion to healing and the business skills I learned earlier in my own career. While it took me a while to figure it out, I believe Williams provided me with the space, the community, the classes, the inspiring professors, the bossy roommate, and other friends. Everything implied in the deceptively simple phrase, a Williams education. This place transformed me by showing me what was possible, giving me the space to take risks and try it out, as well as a safe place to land when those efforts failed, helping me make intellectual, professional, and personal connections, and providing a caring community to which I could always return, and I will. Thank you.
I am so honored to be here this afternoon. It's a wonderful moment for me to be coming back to Williams for our 25th reunion, class of 2000. I've seen many wonderful faces that I haven't seen in so long, and it's quite remarkable, and I'm honored to be asked to be here today and share a bit of my story. I applied to Williams in the fall of 1995. I wrote my application essay about my family, comparing and, more importantly, contrasting my positive upbringing alongside my three brothers to the tragic sibling rivalry explored in Shakespeare's King Lear. Pretty good one, right? Yeah. My parents instilled a strong set of values in my brothers and me, and in a full circle way, that is what I want to speak about today. What I didn't know at the time that I wrote that essay, but what I have come to understand since, is that Williams would become a second family for me, reinforcing those very same values my parents taught me. Today, 25 years after my graduation, I can see that I was raised and shaped both by my parents and by Williams College and the community I found here. My parents met in Philadelphia in 1967, products of two very different backgrounds. My father is white, Andover and Harvard educated like his father before him, and pursuing a graduate degree in architecture at University of Pennsylvania at the time. My mother was black, and among the first in her family of 10 siblings to aspire to the possibility of higher education. Though she never attended college, she studied visual art in Philadelphia while working as domestic help on the main line in Pennsylvania. She'd studied visual art in Philadelphia. She was a switchboard operator, and when her roommate made her the introduction to my father, it was an unlikely but pretty immediate pairing. They were at the vanguard of a generational shift around who you could love, who you could marry and start a family with, validated in the Supreme Court's decision that year in Loving versus Virginia. Growing up, my older brothers and I would hear stories of this and other moments in that era of great social change, stories of participating in civil rights protests. My mother marched on Washington with Martin Luther King Jr., of starting and living on a back-to-the-land commune that my father founded in Stratford, Vermont, of hanging out with musicians on the West Coast, Gracie Slick and Jefferson Airplane in Bolinas, the Beat Poets in San Francisco, of starting a family and falling in love and having us. Woven throughout were the core values that became equally a part of our own upbringing. In all of those stories, the values were shared again and again. First, we were taught the value of working towards the greater good in our community. When I was little, much of this work happened through our church in Stratford, Vermont, where I would accompany my mom on visits with the sick and elderly, and often deeply impoverished populations in our community in the Upper Valley. Second, we were taught the power of education. My family literally crossed the country, moving from our dairy farm in Vermont to a farm in northeastern Iowa, to the San Francisco Bay Area, to seek out the best possible schools for me and my brothers. And third, we were taught to celebrate and center the arts. Some of my earliest memories are of being perched on my mother's hip as she painted. She was a true artist and with a deep interest in the history of art, studying late into the night to pass the tests required to become a docent at the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco, where she became and served as a docent for over a decade. When I arrived at Williams College, my mom told me that I had to take Art History 101. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I was like, I'm pre-vet, and I went to my first science class here at Williams and realized, oh my goodness, I love farm animals, and I loved, James Herriot, and yet I am not a veterinarian. So I took Art History 101, and when the lights went down and the slides came up, I knew I had found home. It felt really, really wonderful. When I arrived at Williams, I immediately realized that I was in a place that reflected and shared the values that my parents had given me. From inspiring classes to provocative late-night conversations with friends, the spirit of intellectual inquiry and creativity was pervasive in every aspect of school life. And when it came to care for the members of its community, Williams went above and beyond in my unique situation. At the start of my sophomore year, my mother, a breast cancer survivor, was diagnosed with a recurrence of cancer that had spread to her liver, and she was given 6 months to live. I appealed to the school to take a leave of absence the fall of my sophomore year to be with and to care for her. And Williams approved my request after a supportive one-on-one conversation with my dean. My mother passed away at the end of the following summer, and before she died, she asked me to promise that I would return to Williams to finish my degree, as she knew that education changes and transforms lives. I kept my promise. Williams lived and breathed its mission statement in its support of me during my time here, and I am sure that this is true for countless others who have come through Williams. This care has buoyed me in the years since my graduation. My life, not surprisingly, has taken many twists and turns, from getting married to a wonderful best friend who was at Brown while I was at Williams, to starting our family and having 3 kind and generous and beautiful daughters, 2 of whom are here today. And I'm going to do a quick moment of shout out. My youngest was supposed to be here, but she's 13 and she's at Youth National Rowings in Sarasota, Florida, because she made it into her crew boat and she is incredible. So she's actually racing at the same time that I'm giving this speech. So it's pretty incredible. So from getting married and having my 3 beautiful daughters to battling breast cancer as a young mother myself, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer when I was 31 years old. But through it all, those core values that my parents taught me and that Williams reinforced in me have remained my North Stars: community, education, and the primacy of art. I currently serve as the executive director of Headland Center for the Arts, one of the preeminent artist residence programs in the nation, located in Golden Gate National Park just north of San Francisco. What we do might seem simple. We host artists for several months at a time and provide them with studio space, but it is actually quite transformative. At Headlands, we make much needed space for artists to focus on their practice, to build community, and to center the creative process. And in so doing, we create the conditions for people to change the way we see ourselves in the world. Our alumni artists, including the likes of Julie Mertu, Sanford Biggers, and Firle Baez, are doing just that. This work is more important right now than ever before, and it is deeply linked to the same work being done here at Williams and at our nation's other educational and arts institutions. Like many of you, I read Maud's From the President letter in the spring 2025 magazine against the backdrop of a world where many of the things that I hold most dear are under threat and attack. I cut the page out and taped it to our refrigerator, highlighting these closing words. At a time of wavering public and government support for higher education, what matters is that we, the people, speak up for the human project of teaching and transmitting knowledge to the next generation as part of their preparation for life. Education is the promise of our future. It is the way we cultivate our humanity and try to solve society's problems. It is also the heart of what unites us at Williams. Let us work together to protect and improve it. As a leader in my community, committed to education and to the arts, and as a cancer survivor who is here today, thanks to the life-saving research and clinical trials that I benefited from at Stanford University and University of California, San Francisco, it is my responsibility to heed that very call. To work to protect the primacy of education in democratic society is a call, the echo of which traces back to those foundational values from my childhood and from my time here at Williams. All of us in this audience are being summoned to speak up, as Maud has said. I know my mother would have said the same, and so I do, and so I will. Thank you.
Gosh, going last, this sucks. Okay. Senior year winter study, I took singer-songwriter. In the class, there are 2 types of people. folks who are incredible musicians, and folks that could sing really well. I was the exception. I like singing, and I could kind of play some chords on the guitar, but I didn't quite fit into either group. When I performed the draft of my song, Burgers and Fries, in class, the teacher said, "Nancy, you have great stage presence." Okay, cool, yeah. The day of the performance, for nerves, I got the class a hand of tequila. We all took a collective shot and sang our hearts out. I like to think I was the personality selection. This theme of not quite fitting in has always been a thorn in my side. Growing up, my grandma would give the bigger pieces of meat to the male cousins. The men in my family often made remarks about us girls' bodies and joked that a good marriage would be our best future. I would talk back, stand up for us, and I received consequences for that. Because I felt like I didn't belong in that world, I worked hard to get out. When I got into Williams College, my parents said, "Williams College? I've never even heard of that." They eventually recognized it as a legitimate college when it was mentioned in the Chinese paper. I remember my first time on campus. A bunch of us admitted students from New York City came up for Multicultural Weekend. We were greeted by the beautiful purple mountains. I stayed with a sophomore that was in the Frisbee team, my sport. I talked to a JA who was a Christian, and he was cool and cute. Faith was a big part of my life. And I went to a party with a cage. Yes, I said yes to the Purple Valley. I know, yeah, the things, I was 17. I got my first C freshman fall in statistics. This is a terrible start. I was one of 2 Asians on the Frisbee team. I guess we're not in New York City anymore. I learned about Martha's Vineyard and Patagonia jackets and playing squash. A classmate joked, "Nancy, the only reason you're here is because you're poor and Asian." I didn't quite laugh because I did believe that was true, that I slipped through the cracks of admissions. When I was struggling with schoolwork, I didn't ask for help. I didn't know how to. I didn't know if that was allowed. I hated speaking to my parents on the phone because I didn't want my classmates to hear me speak in my Chinese Hoisan dialect. It always sounds like you're screaming, even when we're not. So I worked really hard to hide the parts of me that might be evidence of how much I didn't belong here. After Williams, I got a job at a law firm. It was a next step that made sense. 2 weeks in, I knew that was not where I belonged. Securities litigation, depositions, no thanks. But I stayed because the people were kind, the money was good, and it was a respectable job. And for funsies, I took an evening acting class. 6 months after that class, I moved to Los Angeles. I found this amazing acting class led by Steve Braun. It was like AA, Actors Anonymous. We'd walk in, sit in the dark, come up 2 at a time to do Meisner repetition, and then come up for scenes. After 3 hours, some of us would go across the street and drink, dissecting everything that came up in class. That was my favorite night of the week. But my career as an actress is, as you read in the papers in Hollywood. I would get called in for nice Asian girl, waitress number 2, shy daughter who's afraid to tell her family she wants to be an artist. I booked unpaid student films and independent projects, but I wanted more. I felt like I could do more, especially because I was raging and crying and feeling and expressing more of me in class. Acting didn't allow me to hide. It didn't allow me to run. I had to be honest and allow myself to be seen. Steve sits me down one day in his office, and he says, "Look, Hollywood isn't going to give you the roles you want. You need to write, you need to create them." I could be resentful, or I could keep trying to fit myself into the crumbs I was given, hoping one co-star role would lead to a guest star, then to my big break. Or I could embrace these truths. I don't quite fit into any of these castings. I don't quite belong in those stories. Okay, I guess I'll try to create something else. In church, I often heard about the idea of thorn in my side. Paul, one of the apostles, was super smart and qualified, but had this thorn in his side that would not go away, which forced him to rely on the grace and strength of God. I think my deep sense of never belonging and fitting in isn't really going to go anywhere. But when I don't fight, flight, or freeze, It is my source of creativity and my radar towards community. I get to imagine new worlds that expand who gets to say and what is said. I get to embrace this jaggedy, messy, all over the place mind and heart of mine and earnestly express from there. I get to connect with the tribe that vibes with this kind of play. In 2019, my solo show about growing up in Chinatown was produced by the Latino Theater Company for a 5-week run. I talked about my dad's abuse, my early age need to save my mom, my journey to letting go and letting God. I remember after one of the shows, this older white man came up to me, held my hands, tears in his eyes, and said, "Thank you." We could not be more different, yet we were alike. I'm currently writing a musical inspired by my mom. It takes place in a sweatshop, but it's not sad. Yes, there's trauma, but it's about the community of immigrant women that find joy. Yes, to immigrants. The journey is messy and all over the place. I say it's kind of punk rock. And I get to share the stage with these badass women who didn't try to fit in, but really carved out solutions for these aches and big questions you had. It's truly been in the Williams community where I have found the most people that embrace this jaggedy, expansive, can't be boxed in vibe. Professor Devidas, he taught linear algebra when I was here, and he did it so well, he convinced me to take topology, my other C at Williams. And then I see him preaching at church, throwing all my judgments about faith and reason. And he builds sculptures for Burning Man. My classmate and friend Miju is a high-level executive at a financial firm, and she plays bass in a punk rock band, and she's raising 2 kind boys, and she sent me a spreadsheet of what I needed when I decided to go to Burning Man. I promise that's the last reference to Burning Man. The countless Williams alumni that helped me when I moved to LA to pursue my dreams, including you, Dan Blatt, class of '85. I was a nobody, and yet they made time for me, looked over my contracts, took me out for meals, taught me to budget. Their generosity and lack of gatekeeping are radical in Hollywood. Williams people are evidence of magical, unexpected paths. They are curious, generous, and passionate. They have integrity and guts to follow that risky small voice inside. It's us at our core. So I'm grateful that I never quite fit in because it gave me the perspective and push to listen harder to what aches inside of me, to include who else is being left out, and to imagine new things. So let's continue to be the exception. Thank you.
Keep weeping today in happiness. It's really very moving presentations. Thank you so much. Can you please all join me in thanking our guests here for sharing a bit of their stories at the 11th annual Dwelling of the Gallant. Nothing like a standing O, right? Feels fantastic. You all sat dutifully back down, but actually I'm going to now invite you to join us in the lobby. We are going to have a champagne reception to celebrate 50 years of being fully coeducational at Williams College and the incredible impact of our alumni. At 4:15 here on the main stage, I will be joined by Society of Alumni President Fumi Alosunde for a conversation, and I hope you'll come back and join us then. Thank you.